Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Nicholas LaRue. Nicholas, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. I definitely need a haircut, so some people in our audience might notice.
I wish I had that problem.
That's why I try not to complain about it.
I got to wear the hat because it keeps the glare from the light off.
That's fair. That's fair. I wanted to wear one today, but I was like, it probably looked weird, so I decided not to. So yeah, I know that feeling. So we're going to start in right with that first question. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Short. No, not at all. No, it's thank you for asking. Yeah, it started a really long time ago. The first story I ever wrote, I guess, would be considered fan fiction. I was in middle school, and I wrote a Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, that's cool.
Sequel. That involved, not just Freddy Krueger, but a second, kind of demon entity that is very similar to him. I'm hesitant to even go into it because I'm actually rewriting it.
Oh, that's cool.
And if you've ever tried to read and rewrite something you wrote in middle school, it's an interesting experience, and then we had computer classes and in the back in the early PC days of the early 90s. And, we would be told you could write anything. This is a writing class, and so I used to write stories because I was big into comic books. So I used to, in superheroes and stuff. So I used to write stories about a kid who would travel through a portal to some superhero's world and team up with that superhero, and whatever superhero he was with, he would gain the powers of that superhero.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it was kind of like seeing, that superhero's kind of what they do through his eyes, and then defeating one of their rogues gallery. So, so that was middle school. I took a lot of time off after that, did some traveling, and then in my mid-20s, I was an IT guy. I was a network engineer for a company, and everyone knew I really liked watching movies. And so, someone had the suggestion at one point, hey, you ever thought about being a film critic? And I said, only every day of my life. So I went ahead and I started kind of just informally reviewing movies, which led to a friend saying, hey, we just went and saw Underworld or some ridiculous film. And they said, you want to start a podcast and talk about it? And I said, sure. And so one thing kind of led to another, which then led to my boss saying, in 2009, when the market first crashed in my lifetime, hey, we need to let you go. So, but you have been, because I was kind of low man on the totem pole, even after being there for years. I was still kind of the youngest guy there by 20 years. Wow. So, my boss, really nice guy, to me anyway, said to me, hey, you seem to really like this movie stuff. And this is a guy who's a business owner himself. He said, do you ever think of maybe trying to do this for a living? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, we're letting you go, so you should go do that. and he was nicer about it too. He was like, well, here's the deal. We'll make sure, apply for unemployment. He goes, that'll give you a year, to really try it out and see if you like it. And I'd gotten a lot of advice from other people that said, if you're going to do something, try it for a little bit of time, see if there's an audience for it. I said, I have a year. I have a year to try to see if there's an audience. I have a year to write reviews, watch movies, to see if this is something that I either want to or can do for the rest of my life or the foreseeable future. And that 1 year lasted 10 years. And in that 10 years, it was crazy. I mean, I got to learn a lot about things like influencer marketing and what you need to do to not only be someone who promotes and is an ally of the filmmakers, or in your case, authors, and effectively be able to help people while still also earning enough money to kind of keep some level of food on the table. And, that it was kind of a really interesting time, because that was also when crowdfunding really first started. That's when podcasting became popular. That's when there was a window of opportunity that if you were going to make money on the internet doing something that wasn't an OnlyFans account, you could do that. and and have some modicum of success. And I was able to do it. We reached millions of people. I got to travel all over the country. I got to give speeches on film marketing and distribution. I got to meet a bunch of great people, help people with their films, not only for promotion, but sometimes behind the scenes stuff, sometimes, whatever. So the writing was kind of the backbone of all of this, because, reviewing movies and stuff like that, but also editing and reading other people's reviews, because I had people that wrote for the website and stuff as well. And so I got a really good kind of taste of it there. So then I moved to Los Angeles, and then I started working for the studio system. And I was the head of post-production for a studio. And then there was no time for writing, because that was a more than full-time job.
Yeah.
Then I met my wife, I got married, and then we moved for her career from Los Angeles to Tennessee, where I had nothing to do, because there's no movies there. I mean, at least no movies getting made.
Yeah.
And Film Snobbery at that point, which was the website that I ran, had kind of petered out, because that window that I talked about for like film criticism, stuff like that, had kind of closed. At least doing it for a living had kind of closed. I mean, we're talking very, very post, Roger Ebert post, but the rise of Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, and it's just a thumbs up or a thumbs down, oddly enough, Roger Ebert, a thumbs up, thumbs down, and that is it. You're either good or you're not. There's no room for intelligent discussion. If, there's no room for anything. It's just everyone has an opinion, and apparently everyone's opinion is correct. Otherwise, looking at if you look at Twitter, that's basically every discussion on Twitter is, how can't you see that I'm right? And so I started doing some writing while I was in Tennessee, particularly when the pandemic hit, because I think I'd reached a level of stress where my creativity needed to come out, and I had no outlet. The other way that manifested was I became a woodworker. Completely the opposite from network engineering and writing. I didn't grow up with a dad. So, I never picked up outside of like basic home repairs. I never picked up a hammer in my life, never did anything. And so I took one online class, and I learned the best piece of advice in that online class I've heard in terms of simplifying an entire craft, which was, dude, everything you're going to build is a box. It's just some kind of a box. And I've looked at it, and it was like one of those, like, when you can really see the epiphany come. Oh, yeah. It was that. It was just, it was just like, oh my God, everything is a box. And to a degree, I mean, that's translatable in a lot of different things, even in writing. Writing, even if you're writing 5,000 words or you're writing 100,000 words, it still has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Even if there's a to be continued at that end, it still has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You still have to tell a complete story. And you just have to play at building that box for your audience, and letting them kind of run wild within the confines of that box. And so, I started writing, and what I started writing was when I was in Tennessee. This was a few years ago. I started writing scripts, because I come from the movie world. So why wouldn't I not try my hand at that? And also part of it was a little bit of people that used to say about critics, those they say about critics, those who can't teach, and those who can't teach criticize. So I wanted to kind of prove, not only to myself, but to some of the people that I had met along the way, that, not only can I talk the talk, but I can walk the walk a little bit as well. And that turned into, it got a ball rolling that has continued till now. And now we moved from Tennessee to Boston, or to the Massachusetts area. And now, I just put out a book. It's a novella called Saving Hitler. And then I have written another book, which I adapted from a series of scripts that I wrote. I have that's being edited, and then I have another book that I'm about 3/4 of the way finished, along with 3 short stories that I've also done. So in terms of writing, it was very nothing, everything. And so that's kind of where we're at now with that.
Definitely understand that feeling of like nothing, and then right. Like it's funny that you said like I just laughed so hard when you said having to rewrite something from middle school. So it's basically what I had to do. I had an idea for middle school that was essentially fan fiction for Forgotten Realms, because at that time, like 2000 and whatever, up until I think 2006, TSR was still doing like the you could submit a book idea, and then if they liked it,
Oh,
they would hire you.
that's cool.
So I worked for like 6 or 7 years, and then unfortunately, like college came, and I got distracted. But in college, I took this old idea of Forgotten Realms, made my own fantasy world. Wanted to be an illustrator originally, so I was drawing a lot, and I had drawn my own characters and own races and things, and I came up with this world, and I did this great book. It was like a ABC book, and then like had all my own characters, like 26 of them. I did writing for all these characters, so then I actually let it sit. So I had evolved that Forgotten Realms idea and changed some names and things, and then later on, like probably about, I think it was right when we moved back up this way from Arizona, where I met my wife about 7 years ago. I was like, I'm going to redo this idea, and I added a lot of philosophical things and stuff. But yeah,
Mhm.
it became really hard to look at the middle school stuff and to, you know what I mean? Because I had,
Oh
even when I
yeah,
wasn't writing, I had different ideas. It's like
yep.
it was painful. Like it was like
Oh, you almost want
seriously.
to go like, honey, look what this idiot wrote.
I
Oh
did. I
wait, that
told my
idiot's
wife.
me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Her and my
Yep.
friend
No,
are
I
like,
completely.
they're like, there were some cool ideas here. I'm like, there were, but I'm like, not as developed. But yeah, you could definitely tell, like, it was difficult.
Well, I think that's where life experience comes in.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that when you're young, creativity to a degree comes so easily, and your mind will automatically go to these things, and they'll create those worlds, and they'll take these, even if they're just based on things that you already love, and taking them to another level. And it's no different than playing with action figures
yeah, yeah,
or building with Legos when you're a kid or anything like that. It's just world building that kids are just really, really good at. The
yeah,
problem is that they lack the life experience to
yeah,
add
yeah,
nuance and
yeah,
to add any sort of actual logic to the world building. It's just like, yeah, that guy absolutely is breathing air in space. There's no air in space. Yeah, but he's breathing in space. Okay. Like with a kid, you just go with it, but
yeah,
I've already literally been, I'll give a short story to someone to edit, and they'll be like, yeah, that's not what this is. And I'm like, it is though, because that's what I said it is. They're like, yeah, but like the reality is that doesn't work. And I'm like, but this is science fiction. It
yeah,
can work in any way I decide it will. And
yeah,
they're
yeah,
like, yeah, but, and I'm like, okay, I know what you're saying. You're trying to apply logic. And I think that almost actually going against my own argument here, which is age gives you some level of idea of logic, things coming to a logical conclusion, and basics of things like science and stuff like that you apply to things to make them more believable, versus the completely unbelievable things that you can do as a child because no
yeah, yeah,
one cares, or no
yeah,
one really tells you can't,
yeah, yeah.
you know so yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because like I'm thinking of, like I had some people talking about that in terms of, different like I forget the author now, but it was one of the Forgotten Realm. Oh, Troy Denning wrote this great creating your own creatures book and monsters, and so I've been going back through it again. So I'm trying to finish it up this summer to reread it. But especially with these current zombies that I'm writing about, I kind of want them to be more like a fungi or amoeba type thing, where they have more of a colony type of mind,
Mhm,
almost to like a mixture of like a wolf pack sort of thing. Um,
mhm.
but it's like, and I had somebody, they're like, well, that's not realistic. And I'm like, listen, I'm like, you're talking about zombies here not being realistic. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you have creatures at the bottom of the ocean that are not supposed to be able to live because they're so close to the Mariana Trench and, volcanic ash and stuff. I said, but that exists. But I said, your problem is with zombies and different aliens I create. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely understand that. It's like you kind of scratch your head after a while. You're like, this is fantasy, horror, sci-fi. Like, what are you talking about? Like this is
Yeah, if this was
mental.
if we were writing nonfiction
Yeah,
and there was
totally.
an inaccuracy there, like I can totally take my ego and put it to the side for a minute and
Yeah,
go, you're absolutely right, this needs to be correct.
yeah, yeah,
But it's like I'm building this world in my head, and even if that world has a basis of in the real world, like I get it. It was funny. Like I did an interview a couple of days ago and someone said, wait a minute, you're going to kill Hitler, but that'll create a paradox. And I'm like, yeah, except it doesn't. So it's just like, well, why? Well, because I don't need it to. Like, what if I needed to create a paradox and it's essential for the plot, then absolutely, like that's what will happen. But in this case, and I address it. I said I actually said that in the book where like, no, there's people that monitor that shit, so you don't have to worry about whatever. So
well, it's like I'm gonna finish tonight. I'm about halfway through with Ryan Reynolds. The Adam Project. And his younger self, so he meets his younger self, right? His younger self says, he's like, you're going to create a paradox. He's like, no, I'm not. And like, they didn't really explain it, but Ryan Reynolds just has this like funny couple of lines where like it kind of does explain it. And it kind of just like shuts him down, but also shuts you down effectively in the writing to you not really thinking about it after that. And you just have fun because that's what the whole movie's about. Is like he comes back in a time and meets his past self and they have an adventure. And it's like, I mean, it set I felt like just that one scene set the precedent very well, where, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, here, this is what we're doing. If you don't like it, shut it off. If you don't mind it, let's go and have some fun. Like it was,
like, I think that most people, when it comes down to time travel, they're either in one of two camps, right? They're in Back to the Future or they're in Terminator. And, and very rarely do they allow anything to exist outside of those two kind of common ground kind of things.
The Back to the Future people drive me nuts though, because in the Back to the Future 3, all Marty has to do is go to the mine where the other DeLorean is, because effectively because of their rules in Back to the Future and their world building for their their type of time travel and their physics, the other time machine's just chilling with the gas and the parts that they need. So all they have to do is go and dynamite like he did. I'm like, it's still there. And the parts are still there. And I'm like, done. Movie's done in 15 minutes. Like,
well, it's weird because the one time travel movie that a lot of people don't reference as much, but it's just as popular, that blows the logic of all time travel movies away, is Bill and Ted. Because Bill and Ted set the precedent of, if I just say or think that this is what's going to happen next, it will happen. If I say that there's a key hiding behind that rock to get those guys out of jail, it's already there behind the rock. I just have to remember that I did that before. And, because after this, we're going to go back in time. We're going to do that. And then this is going to happen. And then they have the Deus Ex Machina, whatever they need to do the thing. Like, it is the equivalent of the Doctor Who sonic screwdriver at that point. Like, it will do, like, whatever we need to do will be solved by this one thing. And they've used it like to some degree in almost every movie to kind of get out of whatever jam they've actually been in.
I always forget about that one.
Most people do.
Yeah, that one was fun. I haven't seen the newest one. I really need to, but I love those growing up. And now I'm gonna have to go watch it later. Not a bad thing. But so for that second one, so what genres do you currently write in right now?
Okay, so Saving Hitler is a time travel adventure comedy.
That's awesome.
I guess science fiction would be thrown in there a little bit, considering the time travel aspect of it, and some of the more sciencey and fiction aspects of it. Down and Down Under, which is the one that's kind of loosely based on my own life, that's more of a new adult fiction, just general fiction, I guess. And then I have another one called Hidden Talent that also would be considered kind of new adult fiction. I have 2 short stories available on Kindle Vella right now. Those are, one has been told to me that it is technically fan fiction because it involves characters that were previously created. I was like, okay. Whatever, I'll play along. And then the other one's horror, like more of a psychological horror, so with a little bit of a sci-fi bent in it. I have another one that I just finished that I have to get it edited, but that'll go up on Vella as well. That one's called Susto, and that one is like straight up horror.
Oh, that's cool.
Which also has some LGBT themes in it as well. So, cool. I try to try my hand at a little bit of everything for multiple reasons. Number one, I think that when you're a newer writer, even if you're someone who has written your entire life, you know, to some degree, right? Like we've all written papers for college or school or whatever. You know, a lot of us out there write blog posts, whether it's for us or for someone else. I actually do freelance work, and I've done freelance like copywriting and stuff like that for other companies and stuff like that. So I've written about everything from, you know, biotech and engineering stuff all the way to just like hiring personal bodyguards, you know, like it's stuff I have no skin in the game on. But I find that it's really important to challenge yourself to write as many different things as possible, because number one, you might not know what you're really good at. You might not know what you might really enjoy. You might not know what your audience will react to as well, because there's a business aspect to that, as you know, as part of it, which is you have to find who your audience is, and are they following you because they like you as a writer, or are they following you because they like what you write? And I think that, you know, there are some people that can do both of those things at a very, I mean, at the highest level. You're looking at guys like Stephen King. People follow Stephen King because they like what he has to say as a person. They like who he is as a writer. They like the work and the adaptations of his work that have come out of it. So, you know, I think at the highest level, you're there. Now, if we're talking, this is a house and he's at the top, he's in the master bedroom, I am 3 streets away. So
right next to my house.
Yeah, I'm next to your house. We're neighbors now. No, so, you know, it's a, you know, I've got a long way to go before I kind of get there. But, you know, you have to kind of, you know, play around and experiment a little bit to see what works best for you in your writing style. I found that like I'm really strong with dialogue, but I'm absolutely dog crap at, you know, scene description, you know, and a lot of that comes from screenwriting, because in screenwriting, you just have to tell me, is it day or night and what room are we in? And then there's someone else's entire job is to bring that to some level of reality. So, you know,
even like costuming.
Exactly. So, you know, I found that I have a really hard time, you know, creating. I'll give you an entire book worth of dialogue. That comes very easily. But then if you ask me to put in 15,000 words of description, well, suddenly I don't fall apart, but like I find it to be much more difficult. And also I'm a real proponent, despite how I speak, because I'm really verbose, but like, I'm a real big proponent of like, I just want the guy to get there. The guy, the girl, the protagonist, the antagonist, whoever. I just want him to get from point A to point B. I don't give a shit how they got there. I only care that they got there. And because that is what advances the plot along, not the 20-minute description of every tree they passed on the way there, you know? You know, and here's the thing. I absolutely revere people that can do that and do it in an entertaining manner. I mean, let's be honest. Tolkien made an entire career out of people walking. And the description of the things they saw along the way. You know, I mean, so I have a lot of respect for people that can do that in an interesting manner that'll keep you like really like going. I'm not that person. I'm the person who, like, my plot and my pacing, I hope, tends to go very quickly. The downside of that is that I don't know if I may even ever write 100,000 word book, because I tend to want to get you to that satisfying ending far sooner than I think a lot of people want to.
No, I think that makes sense. I'm thinking of like R.A. Salvatore is one of those who like he could write a fight scene, a description, like I don't care what he writes, like he could write about his day. Or one of my friends said he could write about paint drying or grass growing and make it sound exquisite, you know. And I'm like, I'm just not that way. Like I like that kind of, you know, like Patrick Rothfuss type of writing and stuff, but it's like I'm more of a Brandon Sanderson, like get in, get out. And like you, like I don't think I was just talking to my buddy about this. I don't know if I can get to 100,000 words in one book. Cause again, like you said, like I actually like more of the Forgotten Realms, you know, the Dragonlance, like the 550 pages about as far as I'll go. Cause then I want to get to the, you know, the next part of the story. So I definitely understand that.
and that also goes to the point of like, if I'm going to write 100,000 words, shit, someone has to read 100,000 words
Yeah, yeah.
then. And is that going to be, is this entertaining enough for for someone to subsist on for what, the week or 2 weeks or a month or however long it takes them to read? And so, because you want the person to, it's not, I guess this is a quality versus quantity conversation,
Oh yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
some degree. Like what you don't want is, you don't want them to, you want them to get what they're paying for,
Yeah.
especially if you're going to charge. And I've seen it, on the self-publishing market, on a paperback, I've seen it from $2.99. I've seen it all the way up to like $20 for a
Oh yeah, yeah.
paperback. And I get it. It's self-publishing, and like there's costs involved, and there's things that, whatever. And this, if that's what you're doing for a living, whatever. But like, you want people to get what they're paying for,
Yeah.
but at the same time, isn't what they're paying for the friends we made along the way? No. I don't know. I mean, I just kind of feel like I want you to have this adventure, and I want you to come along with me on this adventure. But at the same time, I don't want to bloat it for bloat's sake.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, because like I read a book recently. I won't say who, but I read a book recently. My buddy and I were book clubbing. Um, I guess like now everybody's gonna know anyway because I've been talking about it. But like I just feel like there are certain epic fantasy authors where I'm just like, you literally could have been 75,000 words and could have been done. It could have been a much better story. And like we got to one recently, which we're gonna finish up tonight talking about, and it's like I just felt like the ending was not quite there. And we had just said last week, with like probably about I'd say 38 pages left, and we're like, how are you going to get all this stuff done in this book? And there were a lot of things that were left undone, unsaid. A lot of things were stitched together, and I was like, I don't know, I don't know. I did not feel fulfilled. So that's where I went and read my private book with Will White, and I was like, that ending made me feel so fulfilled for the Black Flame, Black Flame, where I was like, okay, cool, and I'm like, I just feel like, that's why I usually don't read epic fantasy. I'm not saying it's the whole genre, but there are certain authors that I don't read as much because, again, you get through all this time and, I don't know. I said to my friend, I said, I think we need to be more, selective on how we're picking epic fantasy books in the future. Because again, that's a long time for him and me. It's like we meet every Sunday. It's like, it's about 125 words every week. And it's like, we have other stuff we want to get to. And with this book that we just got done with, I really enjoyed getting there, but I felt like the ending wasn't quite there. And again, it was like 100, probably about 100,000 words almost exactly, or 95,000. And I was just like, see, that's what I'm afraid of as a writer, is like getting to that point and building up so great. And then I guess pulling a Dark Tower, for the last book where, people just didn't feel quite fulfilled. So I haven't gotten there yet, and I'm gonna get there because I love Stephen King.
But the great part about writing on, and to that degree though, is like, and you hope that people will continue following you, is that there's, and I've kind of adopted this a bit of a mantra when I, even when I'm selling, any of the stuff that I write, which is, well, if you don't like this one, that's okay. Just wait. I'll eventually write something you do like.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and the great part about self-publishing, because I'm not traditionally published yet, but I'm working on that. I have Down and Down Unders, out for querying right now for both agents and publishers and stuff like that. And I think that hidden talent, if what other people are saying so far is any indication, I think hidden talent might be the one that gets me repped. So
cool.
Fingers crossed on that one. Like there's everyone saying like, not only is it's really, they're saying it's well written. I'm not saying that. They're saying it's well written, but also it's one of the more it's the out of everything I've written so far, it's the most marketable. So that's something that I'm kind of excited to finish, so that I can start that process with that.
Yeah.
But until then, you got to work with what you have.
Yeah.
But the idea of like, will you let people down, and should you be afraid of that? I think that there's a level of fear in almost every writer anytime we go to release anything, and there's always that disappointment, that nagging feeling in the back of your head, that is that imposter syndrome, or that whatever, just like it's not good enough. And, because you're holding yourself up to whatever you're into, whether it's Stephen King, or whether it's, freaking Mark Twain, or, or Bronte sisters, or whether it's, Sylvia Plath, or whether it's, whether you're going modern, classic, whatever, like, you can only write you. And so, and when you're giving that out to someone, what you're really afraid of is that you're giving a piece of yourself to strangers and you're afraid of the rejection. And it's the same thing of like, well, what if I go ask out the pretty girl or guy or whomever you're interested in? And, people say, what if they say no? Well, but then someone won't, and I'm proof positive because eventually I got married. So, so someone said yes eventually. So, but I mean, I had to bribe her with comic books, but still, um, sweet, sweet comic book money,
I like that.
But
You should get a T-shirt. She married me for my comic book money. I like that.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because it's just funny that you mentioned that, because I was just thinking yesterday, I was listening to a podcast that I had done with somebody recently, and I was like, I said to my wife, I said, I think there's something wrong with me. She goes, what do you mean? I said, I know that my writing is not where I want it to be. I said, but once I'm taking the summer off to finish up 2 different books. And I'm like, I am gonna try to rapid release like 3 or 4. And like you said, you want to have, like, before you start recording, you want to have, multiple, stokes in the fire, so to speak. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to do historical urban fantasy, an urban fantasy, but like each book ones, and then my own fantasy world for book 1. And then I'd also like to do a book 1 for my sci-fi. I have a couple of sci-fi ideas if I can get it going. But yeah, I don't know. I guess at this point I'm just like, I've talked to so many people who have been let down or whatever, that I'm just like, I'm just gonna put my books out there. And I honestly really don't I guess it's kind of bad now, but I'm getting to the point where I just don't care if like I'm not afraid of rejection. And I guess I'm one of those people
Not
where
caring is the best feeling of all time.
yeah.
Oh,
And I think
yeah.
it's like with like asking people out, right? Like for years, like I got great advice from my uncle when I was in middle school, and I had this girl I had a crush on. He's like, the worst she's gonna say is say no, and then you're gonna move on and have to ask somebody else. He's like, otherwise you can just be lonely your whole life. And he's like, all she's gonna do is say no. He's like, it's not that big of a deal. He goes, it's not gonna feel great for a while. He's like, but it's like anything else. And it
Yeah.
was just such great advice. And I asked her and she said yes. And, and after that, like, growing throughout my life, I was always like, well, I was always thinking to myself, like, if I don't ask, I will never know. And I
Yeah.
want to know. And, that's how I did my whole adult life. And I feel like at this point, like the other day was thinking, I feel it's kind of how it is with my writing too, is I'm like, I know that not everybody's going to enjoy it. I know everybody's not going to enjoy the story. Not everybody enjoys, Stephen King, Patrick Rothfuss, Brandon Sanderson, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that do, and I feel like it's just like my wife, right? Like I had to ask enough, and figure it out enough to get to her. And I feel it's the same way with my audience, is like, it'll be a long road. I know it's going to be, particularly if I want to do indie. But I also really want to do it because I feel like it'd be beneficial. I feel like it's my community. And, I feel like eventually I will find those people,
Mhm.
just like I found my wife. And I just feel like, if you think of it that way, and, not that you should be praised for rejection, but it's like, there's just not everybody's going to like your stuff. I just read an author on Twitter the other day who I think is amazing. And she was like, oh, I got my first 1-star review. And I'm like, cool, but how many 5 stars have you gotten? Mine's one of
Yeah.
them, and I'm like, I talk to people all the time. I read these. I'm like, that could have been somebody where it was like their first fantasy or sci-fi book, or they just didn't jive with your writing style. But I'm like, you
Totally.
need to go to the people that do enjoy your stuff. And I like how you said that earlier. Is you have to find your people, your
Yeah.
community, and I think that's totally true. So
You know, and I think that there's, I mean, yeah, I think expectations play a lot into disappointment.
yes,
And I said this I was on a podcast like a couple hours ago. So I said it to them, which is also, because it was a round table kind of thing. And I said the secret to life, to having a happy life, is low expectations. And I actually kind of I believe it or not, it was a comedian that it was Kyle Kinane,
oh
that
yeah.
he did a little thing in one of his sets, and I can't remember off what album it's on or what special or whatever, but he basically said that like he goes, I believe in something to the tune of like, I believe in miracles, and because miracles could be anything depending on your expectations.
Yep.
He goes, I somehow burnt laundry once, and he goes, that to me was a miracle. Stuff like that. So, and then to the other side of that too, in terms of I especially find this to be true with collaboration, is I am not a person to tend to ask why. Well, why are we going to do that? Why are we going to do, unless it's like a logic based question in terms, and usually I'll do this more in business than anything creative. With business, I ask why a lot, but creatively speaking, my attitude is generally, why ask why when I could ask why not? And that is, it tends to be more of my mantra, because I think that, and I'm not saying like you need to be a yes man or a yes woman or person, but what I am saying is like there are too few people, I think, in creative people's worlds. So probably too few people in your world that when you say I want to write a book, just go, yeah, why not? Why wouldn't you do that? Like, that sounds like a great idea. Like, how can I help? Like, there's not a lot of people that will do that and stand by people like that, because they're too worried about things like, well, how will you pay the rent with that? And how will what is your ultimate goal? Is this, why are you going to do blah, blah, blah? Like, okay, screw all of that. Let's worry about that later. That is, what I like to say is, that's future Nick's problem. I said, but President Nick wants to write a book, and all he wants to hear right now is, why shouldn't we do that? It's not like, and also it's like, I'm saying I want to write a book. I'm not saying I'm going to go out and smoke meth, like,
Lava bank,
like I think there's a bit of a a discernment that needs to be made here on like what the hell the expectation of what I'm trying to do is, and again, it kind of goes back to managing expectations. But yeah, I think that it's far better to be positive about, a creative endeavor, to see where it goes. I explain to my wife, a lot, because she works more on a business end, so it's more left brain versus right brain. And I tell her, I got to go down and I got to write, and I'll be down here for 3-4 hours. And, what did you do? I played video games for 3 hours and I wrote for 1, but that 1 hour that I wrote was really good. You know what I mean? And so to have to, why did you do that? Well, because I'm building utopian societies in my head, Ange, and I need to, I need time for all that to marinate. And, so, but I feel like a lot of people want to put constraints on creativity and expression of creativity. And, I think if you kind of keep, I think if you ask more like, why not, why don't we do that? What, you'll get better contributions of that. And then after the fact, we can figure out, once the creativity part is done, we can figure out what's the next step.
Yeah. No, I think it makes total sense. That's like,
I rambled a little at the end there.
No, I just totally agree, because I talk about, in my books like that, like all the time. And, like I buy a lot of books, and do I have time to read them all? No, but even like book covers that I have, blurbs that, I've bought books for, like I'll go back and look at, even sometimes just the way that they do their title, makes me think of something. And I always tell my mom, she's like, oh, you have enough books. My wife says the same thing. And I say, listen, I said, I guarantee you that at some point I'm going to sell enough books that it's going to cover the cost of all the books I bought in my entire life, and then some. And, because I consider them my investments, and I can sit, not that I'm going to make money off of those, but
theoretically, they're a write-off, because if you're a writer and you're self-employed in any way, I mean, that, which is a completely different conversation of like, I set up an LLC so that I can make sure that there's no question at all about when I write something off for either my woodworking business or for my book writing, that, like, I'm gonna get a piece back.
No. I mean, I just think it makes total sense. That's like my buddy and I talked about doing the same thing for, eventually for, for like the podcast, for like going places and stuff, to cons and stuff. And he's like, yeah, what are you gonna just write it off at the end? He's like, it's a business expense. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I'm like, because you're literally just going, to meet people and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think, but it is interesting, where like even like my miniatures, for D&D, for years, like I'll look at those, and some of those have gave me some of my best writing ideas ever, and I just consider those things, or maybe some of the video games I played, or like Icewind Dale 2. I went back to Icewind Dale 2 recently, and that's just given me like such great ideas, you know, and I'm like, oh, I really like this or that. And I just think that all that goes into, like you were saying, you know, into your writing experience, because it's
Yeah.
all stuff
I
that
mean,
we have
sometimes
to.
the best way to figure out your own world is to play in someone else's for a little
Yep.
while,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah,
And
totally.
yeah, oh, and to your own credit, you'll the one part you'll get a real kick out of is once you get big enough in what you're doing that you won't have to worry anymore about setting money aside to go to places or writing stuff off because they'll just pay for you to do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and I say that based on personal experience. And that's when you know, like, oh, the coin is flipped, you know, the tide is turned, you
Yeah, yeah.
know.
Well, it's like, you know,
I've been
like
hoisted on my own petard.
it's like the last couple of weeks, like, you know, I was like, oh, I was like getting kind of, things were getting kind of stale. And I was like, well, I just enjoy talking to people, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, I had some great opportunities pop up, and they were like within 3 days of each other. And I
Yeah,
was like, dang. And I said to my friend, he goes, well, you only been doing this for, you know, less than 6 months. He goes, can you imagine 2 years from now? You know,
yeah,
like it's just, he goes, or even this time next year, you know, like who's then going to come to you? You know, he goes, you don't have a big audience right now, you know, maybe like, you know, on average, like 25 per whatever on YouTube. And then it was maybe like 45 per, you know, whatever. But I actually had an author the other day where I asked them to be on here in a couple months. And they were a finalist for the SPFBO. And
mhm,
they were like, oh yeah, I would love to be on. They're like, I've listened to so many of your episodes. And I was
yeah.
like, what? I'm like, what? Like that alone like made all the extra time and, you know, energy worth it. Like that was just pretty cool. So
I absolutely, yeah. You know, you're absolutely right. It'll carry. I mean, literally, that will carry you through another month of where
yeah,
you're
yeah,
feeling like there's not much going on, and then you'll remember that and you go, oh yeah, that did happen. And you
yeah, yeah,
know,
yeah.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, yeah. I have a very similar and interesting story, and I don't know if it's good to tell on the air because of who it involves, but I'll tell you about it later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's
that
awesome.
is very similar to that.
Oh, that's
But
cool.
yeah, so I back over to you, pal.
It's just funny. Sometimes I get people on, it's like they just say exactly what happened. It's like the fourth person where it's like stuff happened to me this week. So it's funny that it just keeps happening to me where people keep bringing up things and it's like something I thought about or happened. And it's like, I don't know if it's like serendipity or just like what it is.
Collective
But
consciousness type of
yeah, that
thing.
too.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep. That's just what
yeah.
Christopher G. Brenning said the other day in our second interview. So I'm really interested in this. So what is your short story, Saving Hitler, about? And how did you come up with that idea? That just sounds awesome.
Oh yeah, no, it was in the shower, as all good ideas come from. It's either on the shower or on the toilet, right? I mean,
I
even now
shovel
I'm talking.
snow. Every time I
Yeah,
shovel snow, I get a great idea. Like yesterday, I'm like, I hate snow. I hate shoveling, but I always get a great idea. It's like, it's crazy.
I think it's anything where your brain is distracted by something
Yes.
else, and
Yep.
that allows it to kind of just like something to come in there
Yep.
and go nuts.
Yep.
So, Saving Hitler is a time travel adventure comedy novella about that answers the question, the age old party question of if you could go back in time and kill Hitler, would you? And so this particular book, I almost said stars, like it's a, whatever. There it has the protagonist works
The
for
same
a
thing.
government agency. The protagonist works for a government agency that their job is to go to various points in time and do things for the betterment of the present.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
so, fix things or whatever. And this guy literally gets a sheet of paper. This is his mission: find Hitler, kill Hitler. It doesn't even say Adolf Hitler. Like he knew, like how many other Hitlers could they possibly be referring
Yeah,
to?
yeah.
You know what I mean? So he goes back in time to kill Hitler and he messes up. Some other stuff happens and he creates a future time stream that is like the Holocaust times 10.
Oh, geez.
So he really screws things up, and now he has to figure out how to not only get back in time again, but then to fix it. But then he's got to fix it, and then go back to the present, and make sure everything's good and all that. Hijinks ensue, and not everything goes off as planned. And by the end, I mean, and as we can all tell, right, because this is real life, so everything turned out fine. Everything turned out just fine. But it does. I wanted to answer that party question of like, but what I did find is that number one, people really get stuck on that title. Number two, that people want to then go like, well, what if it's baby Hitler? Okay, but it's not baby Hitler, and I address that in the book too. Or, oh, well, what if it creates paradox? I'm like, I love all the discussion we're having about this, but have you read it yet?
Read it and reviewed it.
Yeah, and one of the funnier things that happened to me was I got in a Twitter exchange with a troll who was just like, well, what Hitler are you talking about? And I'm like, I could tell by the person's account and stuff, obviously, they were trying to goad me on into some stuff. I'm like, screw it, I'll play. Let's play. Because I'm fun dad. Let's go. So I said, I'll go ahead. Let's play. So, I said, it's that Hitler. He goes, no, what Hitler? I said, Adolf Hitler. He goes, probably shouldn't save him. I'm like, correct. That's kind of what the book is about.
Should read the book.
Goes, yeah, but it's called Saving Hitler. And I'm like, correct. Yeah. And, like, I'm just trying to play into it. And it just turned into a whole like thing. And then what happened was I found out later, like his account got banned, and then he tried to create another account and go and engage with me again under a different name. And I'm like, part of me was just like, what in the world? And the other part of me was like, I got my first troll. Not for nothing.
You made it.
I got a whole other Twitter account with 140,000 followers, not one goddamn troll. Okay. So I put out one thing that says Hitler and I got a troll. I'm in. I've made it. So, I was just really kind of like, I wanted to create something that would be a conversation piece. But also it's the first book in a planned anthology series.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
what I wanted to do is I wanted to have this story about this guy. His job is to go back and kill Hitler. But what I've also introduced in the book is the idea that there is this time agency that is filled with all these different departments. And the way I've explained it before was, and they've already kind of did this to a degree, and I like how they did it, was you think about Star Trek, right? There's all the guys on the bridge, and they go on, they do the away missions, and they're all talking to aliens and kirking around and doing all that, right? And then there's the guys down in engineering, and they're just trying to keep stuff together. They're just trying to keep that ship from blowing up, because every time they turn around, someone's taking a hit to the deflector shields, that Christ is about to blow, all of that. So, so in one book, I feel like you can get an engineering perspective, so to speak. Another, book you can get, I have an area of expertise where there's a group of people that their job is to go back and gather intel on where the subjects are going to be and the time frame to make sure that the clothing is right, and put in a safe house, or that stuff like that. Because one of the things that always bothers me about time travel is like people go back in time and they have no resources. And part of that is like, like I get it because it can create drama and stuff like that. But what if you basically created a James Bond situation where your guy goes back in time, but he's got Q, so like he has access to a safe house and money and weapons and all of this. Part of that is also because it helps explain and move the story along a little bit better. So I'm not giving him as many obstacles, which probably, yes, would be better for a 100,000 word thing, but this isn't that. I wanted him to get in, I wanted him to kill Hitler, and I wanted him to, move forward. So, I feel like there's, something can happen to that guy, something can happen to the engineer who screws up, something can happen to, the guy who's in charge of monitoring, the time stream for changes and stuff like that. And, all these people who are just people screw up at their jobs. It's basically a workplace comedy at that point,
Oh, that's awesome.
where just everyone is incompetent, but they're in very high ranking government, positions where people are trusting them with the literal future of society.
So it's real life.
But yet they just aren't great at it. So, and so the idea was to create an anthology around these. And that idea admittedly came after I wrote the first novella, where I was like, oh, I could really play in this sandbox a lot more than I already am. So that was the kind of thing of that. And then, so that is Saving Hitler in a nutshell. It's my first real like foray into self-publishing. So I'll be honest, I'm learning on the fly. There are certain things that are applicable from when I was in the film industry and working with filmmakers that I find still work, and then a bunch of other stuff that absolutely does not.
Yeah. I feel like that's like every time, like I rake back through, different podcasts from 7 years ago. I found a couple of people that I was wondering how they were doing now from like 6 or 7 years ago, from like Lindsay Broker, Joe Lallo, Jeffrey Poole's podcast. I'm about to have a couple of people on from them where it's like now some of those people are, Amazon bestsellers where they had just gotten out, recently at that time. But I picked through quite a few things, but I do agree with there's even in self-publishing, there are things from 2 years ago now that don't work as well. Twitter used to be amazing before the pandemic, and now it's like, it's more of a, like, to find fans and stuff. Now for me, it's more of like a water cooler to find writers, and authors and stuff, or people, artists or something like that, but not necessarily to find fans, and that was what, like 10 months ago, really, when they changed the algorithms. TikTok is very similar to, like, last month, or a month and a half ago, they changed the algorithms for them too. So the For You, you can't do different things. And I had friends that, had like 1.5 million followers, and it's good that they got them, because now if they stitch together certain videos, it only goes to their fans and followers rather than, other people. So it's definitely, you have to definitely update yourself. But I do agree with you though, with time travel. I always wondered that, like, you have like Van Damme going back in time, and, you got all these resources, but like, why aren't you, like, the stock market and everything and how things are going to go. So you would be really rich, I feel like. And why wouldn't they have, basically unlimited resources like the CIA or something like that? Like,
I mean, I explain away the fact that, like, this takes place in the 1930s. It's pre-World War One. Yeah, I think it's pre-World War One.
Pre-World War Two.
Pre-World War
One,
Sorry.
1914.
Maybe it takes place. I'm trying to think of, like, when was Hitler a teenager? And I'm
yeah.
1912, whatever.
So
anyway, so the whole point though is that anything really pre-1951 or something like that is pre-satellite technology. I basically said that, like, oh, this guy has access to a laptop and the internet. Why? Oh, because they went and they actually they went back in time, shot a satellite into the air. Idea. It's just there that no one knows about.
Yeah.
And so, it's just, so now they have access. And I use that as a conduit too, of like, this is how they communicate with the future. Of just cool. Like there's kind of a some level of a connection through the time stream, through that satellite and that internet connection, to kind of update people, call for extraction, that kind of stuff. And I try to not go so far in deep into the technology to that I'm just like, and you've lost me. The literal first words of the book are like, this guy doesn't care how this stuff works. He just knows that the government created it, they tested it, they perfected it, and now this is what he does for a living.
Yeah.
And there are little things here and there, little buzzwords and stuff that I'll bring up because, again, it's like Doctor Who or Star Trek or anything else, where the answer to everything is just, well, have you tried reversing the polarity? And it's like there's no real science to that science fiction at all. However, it does tend to shut people up and allow them to work. So I do little things like that throughout, where I'm just like, okay, well, this is the MacGuffin that makes that work and whatever. And there are some, areas where it looks a little more, I try to make it look a little more plausible than others, but at the end, I mean, we're literally talking about a time travel adventure comedy about killing Hitler. So I mean, I think I've earned the readers kind of suspension of disbelief just even based on that. So I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like, looks like, I'm sorry, but not everybody who drives their car knows, especially nowadays with all the computers with the car, like not everybody knows how to fix, even my friends that are mechanics, who with older cars don't know how to fix these newer things because half of them are computer, and it's I think that
I always love when you pull up the mechanics thing and they're watching YouTube videos, right?
Yeah, right. Well, like, I just think, like, not everybody's a Luke Skywalker in the future. Like, not everybody's going to be able to fix their, like, I actually like that about Mondo from The Mandalorian, like, for season 2, where like he had something go on and he has to go and find people to fix it, because he can fix certain things, like he can change his oil, but like other things, like he needs
Yeah.
people that actually, and I think that's more realistic than Luke, like, and that's one of the things that Luke's really good at, I think, because of the Force. But like, I don't think enough people understand that not everybody's going to be able to fix their own starship, just like not
Yeah,
everybody's able
and
to
to
fix
be
their own
fair
car.
too, like Luke comes from a farm. He lives
Yep,
on a
where you
farm.
have to
How
do
many
that. Yeah.
farmers do you know that know how to fix their own tractors and stuff like that?
Yep.
And I feel like that's kind of the lifestyle he lived. If
Yep.
you're kind of going headcanon on it, of like,
Yeah.
he had to learn to do all these things himself because he lived on a farm on a
Yep.
desert planet in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and he couldn't get to town. Like, you have to be self-sufficient. But yeah, I just think that it makes sense that not everybody knows how to do it. So, him not, like, I thought about that for my pilot for a sci-fi thing. I'm like, well, I want him to know how to fly the ship, but he's too busy leading the mission and doesn't have time to, he knows how to drive. Like, I don't really know if the physics, obviously, with flying, it's a little bit different, but
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know,
Because
like,
you've added the Z axis into there.
exactly. But I'm still thinking
it's so
yeah.
rarely discussed.
Yeah, but I still think
Yeah.
there's certain things that, like, a pilot just, if it doesn't affect their flying, I don't think that they would care, and I just think that, I don't know, I just think it's a little bit different. But yeah, I don't think that they know how to repair, their ship. Like, you'd have somebody on your ship that repairs it. Like, it's like the same with the sea, right? With, like, navies and stuff, especially early navies. Like, you have somebody that, was able to, particularly like galleons, you have somebody that is going to steer the ship, and somebody that navigates, and then you're going to have somebody else that, works the keel, and you're going to have somebody else that, does the repairing. But it's like, it's not the person that's driving. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I like that. I think that it's realistic that somebody would know how. Like, I use my cell phone all the time. I don't worry about how the science works, and I think time travel would be very similar,
which
like,
which during the pandemic has made me laugh endlessly at anyone who sits there and says, but I don't know you don't know what's in the vaccine. I'm like, you don't know about anything about how any of this stuff works.
what about your polio vaccine?
Tell me how this works. I mean, it's a whole thing. And like, not even to get like remotely political about it. It's really more of just like a, well, you don't understand this. I'm like, right, but we all don't understand a lot of things, and yet we do them or take advantage, or we take them for granted on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yes, you're right. So let's educate, and then let's form opinions based on facts and reality, not on feelings and other agendas and stuff. But and that's the other thing too. Like, I don't sit there in Saving Hitler and go, okay, but this guy is a Republican, or this guy's a Democrat, or this guy's a whatever he might be at that particular time. I don't address the type of world, situation that he's in or comes from. I just address that, when he went back and screwed up, that he screwed up the world. I didn't even necessarily bring up Hitler because it trends every freaking day. Like, it was just the idea of, it's the weird thing too. Like, time travel to me, I do occasionally, I've done, and this is more when I was in LA, I did comedy, I did some stand-up. And so I came up with a bit, and I'm going to bring it up on my freaking notes app, because of course that's what I would do. Right. So if time travel were real, you would literally time travel, grab Hitler, parade him out every time some idiot in Parliament or Congress or whatever talks about fascism, and then compares that to Hitler, and just bring out Hitler and go, that sound like you? No, Hitler says no. So try again, like that kind of thing, and it's just, it's just the idea of the idea that Hitler is just this shared experience, not necessarily literally of everyone in our lives, but to our grandparents and to an entire generation of people, that Hitler was this one shared experience that somehow everyone talks about, 60 years. Now, how many years are we going from 1945?
So yeah, 45. What is that? That's 80, right? 82.
Yeah. 80 years.
It'll be 85.
And they literally are still comparing people to him yesterday. And here's the thing, God damn, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm defending Hitler, but Jesus. All right, so Hitler kills 6 million people, not the guy who has killed the most people. but yet the guy with the most press, you know. And so, you know, but it's just, it's such a weird kind of a person to compare things to, or persons to. It's almost like he's the brand name for wrongness. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
like Kleenex is the brand name, or Band-Aid is the brand name for those items. He's the brand name for evil.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
No,
know,
it's true. Yeah, in terms of humans, I mean, yeah, I mean, I again, like, you look at like just the kind of things that he set up for, his own like parliament and dictatorship and stuff
yeah,
like that. And yeah, I mean, that is, yeah. I mean, yeah, he's pretty well branded.
yeah.
Like
And I
pretty
mean,
well
like
branded
now
himself.
after I brought the room down, no, I mean, it's just it makes for it makes for easy thought. The subject is ripe for storytelling,
Oh, for
you
sure.
know, because it's this common thing that everyone recognizes at almost any age. Like the minute a kid steps foot into school, you know, and learns that World War II happened, that person is now knows that story.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and that happens at generally a fairly early age. Usually that's like a middle school thing, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. If
Um,
not like fourth or fifth grade, depending on, what state
what
you're in.
school?
I mean, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, so you know, it's just weird, you know, shared experience between people, and even people who didn't experience it. It is still a point of reference educationally, and so you know, to come up with stories about it is very easy. To do it in a way that is still somewhat culturally sensitive, still somewhat um like I said, you know, it can be hard because there are, you know, it's a sensitive topic, both from, you know, whatever. I try to inject a little bit of humor into it. I try to make it even somewhat historically accurate. There are historical accuracies in there that I made a point to research. The locations, the dates, the time, you know,
Oh, that's
the
cool.
people involved are all taken from actual records that I was able to find online. So, you know, you know, so, you know, I took a little bit of care in here. I didn't just willy-nilly pants my way
Yeah.
through it, but, you know, because I wanted to be sensitive to the people that have their families and stuff that have been affected by this stuff. But at the same time, I wanted to tell a story that I had only heard as a party joke, you know, for my entire life, which is, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler, would you?
It's actually
You
funny
know?
that you mentioned it because that actually just popped up in my history class, like literally on Monday. Like a kid brought it up, and we were like, okay, well, my mentor teacher kind of looked at me. We're like, never had anybody bring it up in class before for middle school, but and yeah, we
Yeah.
were discussing it, and it's just funny that again, some things are serendipitous,
Yeah.
but yeah, like yeah, we just got talking about it for a few minutes, and it really like went down the middle. Like people were like, well, yeah, and then I was like, well, you're gonna kill him as a baby? I said, what happens if
Yep.
something changes and you step on a butterfly? And then I said, what if it creates a worse Hitler, or whatever? And then they were
Yep.
all like, oh man. And I think that's why it is such a great topic to write about, because it's like what would you do? And then adding time travel to it just adds a whole nother dimension of causality and things like
Mhm.
that. So I think it's a great great story to be writing. So
Yeah. No, I mean, and honestly, if I called it killing Hitler versus saving Hitler, I probably would have a handful of more sales than I have now. But you know, the other overarching theme is that our people who we make them, are people who they destined to be, are people whoever. So I have a scene in the book where some guy goes back in time. This was not the first attempt to kill Hitler.
mm,
They did send a guy back to kill him as a baby, and he looked down at the kid and Hitler in his crib and was just like, it's a baby. I can't kill a baby. Like, that's not me.
yeah, yeah.
And and then it went on to mess him up, like, you know, throughout the rest of it. I mean, I kind of only tell it within a short section, but it went on to the point where like that guy commits suicide because it messed him up so bad, the idea that they wanted him to kill a child,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and then the dichotomy of like, but it's him, but it's not him. It's, you know,
I do think
um,
that like there's a philosophical debate that my friend and I had where he came up with a great point. He goes, if you look at World War II, it's like the Civil War for the United States, right? And in terms of the fact that it's such a big deal, and all like we're still on Reconstruction. We've been on Civil War and Reconstruction. We're supposed to start the year with Reconstruction, but because of the pandemic, it's like our kids are so behind, and it's like you can't skip over those two sections because it's a 12-year time period, but it sets up all the rest of our history in this country. And
Yeah.
it's the same with World War II, where it's like my friend made a good point. He goes, I don't think that he goes, I think if somebody went and killed Hitler, he goes, there's so many good and bad things that popped out from that time period and that war that in terms of all of our lives were changed, and those of us, like you said, right, who weren't even involved, so to speak, or born yet. But he goes, I think a causality would have been if somebody did kill Hitler, somebody else would still have been Hitler, because and done the same type of thing, if not worse, because you literally have, and he's like, he just made a good point where he's like, it's like the Civil War, he's like, there are certain things that have to come to a head, and he goes, I do think that personally, he goes, I think that even if somebody did do that, time would have figured it out where somebody else would have been him, because you just have all these things that go on and change because of it. And if you look at timelines, it's like, is it really the time and place that they happen, or the thing that happened that matters most? So philosophically,
Well,
that's a good point.
And that it brings me kind of almost to the non-spoiler alert aspect of the end of the book, which is time has a way of correcting itself.
Yep.
And in this particular case, it's that everything will happen in its own time. And the idea that it wasn't time to kill Hitler when he was a baby. It wasn't time to kill Hitler when this guy comes back and tries to kill him. The time to kill Hitler was the time that Hitler died. And so, and it's unfortunate that the things that had to happen in order for that to occur, but it was the right time for those things to happen. You're right. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the time of, after the Civil War, after Reconstruction, you have the Industrial Revolution, and Industrial Revolution was directly influenced by, a lot of the stuff that was happening during the First World War, I want to think.
For industrialization, industrialization is going to happen because there's two. Second industrialization is basically going to happen right before the Civil War, so it's basically like 1840. But it goes into like the Gilded Age, and it goes right up until really right after World War One.
Because I mean, and then another big thing that would have suffered during that would have been women's suffragism and all of that, because women got that taste of going to work while men were away at war, and being independent and having to fend for their own families and all that kind of stuff. And that sparked also a movement, especially in this country, for civil rights, women's rights, stuff like that, because that was the entire premise of the 50s and the 60s. And so that was all direct causality based upon everything that happened during and after the Second World War. So, I mean, if that had never happened, there's a lot of things that would not be.
No, totally. So, I look at it every day.
Or they would be, but they would be delayed because the need for those things happened during World War II. And I think that's one of those, like, what is it? Something is the mother of invention. Is a necessity is the mother of invention. And the idea that there, things that were deemed necessary during any war that we've had, Civil War, First World War, Second World War, etc., has pushed industrialization, has pushed invention, has pushed modernization every time. For one reason or another, which I know has nothing to do with books.
Well, but when you think about it, though, you think about it, it really does.
But it does.
Though, because when you think about world building, I think you need to think about world building, because like I had an event happen in a book recently, and I was like, changed it a little. And I said, well, what's going to happen with the repercussions for society? As a social studies teacher, my friend, he goes, well, you have it easy because you've studied sociology for so long, and psychology of these different events on society and cultures. And I'm like, well, that is true, with looking at cultural anthropology and things. And, and he goes, it's easier for you because you can look at an event and then think how it affected everybody within that kingdom, that culture, for the next several decades, because you've studied it. And I'm like, oh, that's a good point. So I think it directly correlates to, to causality within your book. And, like for you, especially, like, I think, if you're going to do an anthology like that, I think it it would directly influence the types of decisions that you're
Yeah.
making for your
Well,
characters.
I
So,
mean, the entire premise of it is that someone's doing some part that's just their mundane job, and
yep.
then something happens in the butterfly effect that occurs after that, and then having to reset to some degree, or having to live with the consequences of that, or whatever I decide to write it as.
Yeah, yeah,
But and no, I mean, I think that also when you talk about psychology, sociology, I think that that's really almost what authors do for a living. Is authors try to understand and then regurgitate people in a way. Like, we, even the most introverted of us, I think, will study people and will study things and how they work and why they do things,
yeah,
and then we attempt our best at recreating those things in writing, in whatever fantastical or non-fantastical form we try to do.
yeah,
It doesn't matter if it's your old next door neighbor who used to fart in his sleep, or if it was or if it's someone who is running from a serial killer, or if it's someone who's doing if it's vampires or werewolves or whatever. There's a level of sociology even to vampires and
yeah,
werewolves and stuff, sociology, anthropology, and psychology, that is entered into all of those things. And so I think that, and I know I'm not the first person at all to say this. I mean, like, reading and writing is just understanding,
yeah, yeah.
you know and so and I think that's what a lot of reading especially is: a quest for understanding and connecting. Writing is the idea of, like, this is me reaching out, trying to get you to buy this idea and that I had in my head, and validate it
Yeah,
to
yeah,
some
yeah.
degree.
No, yeah, yeah, totally.
And so, yeah, so that's and what if you validate it, can we be friends? Like, that's
Yeah,
not, I think it's similar to that.
no, totally. I know we kind of touched on the fourth one there a little bit. So you said you're thinking about expanding this into an anthology. Have you
Mhm.
thought about expanding it further into like a Jim Butcher type of series? Like, I know I have a Men in Black style series that I'd love to do, like Jim Butcher with these two guys, and they're like, it's like a buddy cop, but they're Men in Black, and they essentially deal with, it's like Sam and Dean from Supernatural, but they're government funded, and they come, and they're not brothers, but they're best friends, and they come across all these different things. And I kind of want to set it, like make a noir, and set it in like the 50s or something like that. Have you thought of
Okay.
doing something like that at all with with the time traveling agency or these characters, or
You
just an
know,
anthology?
I think that starting it as an anthology and seeing if there's an audience for it, seeing if people
That's true.
are quote unquote buying what I'm putting down,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it will dictate whether the amount of effort I put into pushing it,
Yeah,
um, and also how much fun I have playing in that world, in that sandbox. I think that sometimes there are writers who overstay their welcome in certain things because it's making them money, but they're not getting enjoyment out of it. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. It
I
carries over.
it definitely does. You can tell that, like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then wow, that was not the ending I expected. This guy obviously had a deadline to meet.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
very,
yeah.
it's like when you watch movies and you're watching, like, especially if that person was ever an indie director, you're watching a movie and you'll be like, wow, the studio said no to that right there, and like
Yep.
you can see where the studio notes are throughout the entire script and stuff. And so you can tell that, like, yeah, you had some issues here, and this is why we're getting this watered down thing that you obviously lost interest in halfway
Yeah,
through making, or the studio watered it down for you. And and that even comes out in, like, the promotional stuff. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I love being able to spot stuff like that. I feel bad for them, but like, I love being able to go, like, yeah. Um, so yeah, it really it determines what dictates going further on it is just, like, how much do I enjoy playing in that sandbox. Also time, like, I literally have one other book finished right now that I'm editing and trying to get out there. I have another book that's just about done, that's ready to get then edited and then out there, and then a series of short stories. And I haven't even touched yet in my career things like contests, festivals, other kind of submittable type of events that, will distract from time or will make me have to write other stuff for specifically those things. So, I would definitely say, like, never say never, because hey, why say why when you can say why not? But I think it's really more of a time's going to dictate what will happen with that on its own time. Right now, it was important for me as a relatively new writer to meet a deadline, get something out there, and then continue doing, like, rinse, repeat in a way, like continue doing that, continue to get things out. And then I can step back and go, okay, let's see how the audience is responding to that. We can pivot based on that and see where we need to be, see where the demand is, see whatever. And then at the same time, we're still focusing on traditional publishing as well as the self-publishing, as well as, the traveling and all the other stuff that goes on with it. It's just, there's a lot of moving pieces, and it's always been, I mean, I'm somewhat used to it. I'm a little older now, but I'm somewhat used to it, from doing film snobbery and being a film critic. All the marketing is on you anytime you're a business owner. And when you are an author and it's just you are a business owner. I mean, you have a business plan, and you have an idea of what you want to be and what you want to accomplish by X amount of time, and you set your own metrics and you try to meet those deadlines. And so that's the short-ish answer.
Well, I definitely think that I love the time travel agency thing. Like, I think that's why a lot of people really liked, I think it was called The Company, right, in the Umbrella Academy. I think it adds a whole different type of story. And I don't remember seeing too many, like, I think they always have like what was it, Looper, with a bunch of those guys like Bruce Willis and stuff. Like, I think that's why I mean, I always see those stories do really well, but again, I don't think a lot of people have focused on, the actual time travel agency itself. I do think that that'd be like a really cool, like, TV show or something like that too. But
they keep trying to do stuff like that. Like, they keep dropping they bring up the idea and then they drop it again in Legends of Tomorrow. There's this whole time agency thing in Legends of Tomorrow that they'll like, oh yeah, there's a time agency, and then it's like, yeah, we forgot about writing that whole thing for whatever reason, and like they'll still include the characters and stuff, but they don't give them really enough to do, and it's like, because their focus really is about on the superheroes, and there's a level of fan service that comes along with that. But I mean, Legends of Tomorrow is basically just it's a time travel TV show. I mean, the only one that I'm kind of looking forward to is the reboot of Quantum Leap that they're going to be doing.
Oh, I'm really excited about that.
I think that'll be really interesting.
Well, it's crazy because Loki did so well, with the Time Lords. I get it's Marvel, but like, I do think that my friend and I had mentioned the other day, I do think that has opened up a market for more, people don't just want more superheroes, they want more time travel. I think that added a whole new level of, of sophistication to the storytelling.
I think fantasy, science fiction, anything that's escapism right now is doing really well because of what we are all living through currently.
Which natural disaster or historical event are you talking about? Because it's like, my friend and I were talking about the other day. It's like possibly, pre-World War III, pandemic, like aliens now apparently exist. A bunch of governments said that. It's like, it's just crazy to think about how much has happened in 2 years. It's just like, it's nuts.
it really is crazy. I mean, I feel like I've lived an entire lifetime, and then sequestered in just one place. In 2 to 3 years. It's really the amount of stuff that I can only imagine another. It's not going to be the next generation, but I'd say like 2 generations from now are going to look back at like in 100 years are going to look back at this particular moment in time, and well, if we ever get there, and they'll be like, geez, those guys, that was that, some stuff went down. We're all very tired now.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy. That's my friend.
My wife and I just bought our first house, which I never thought was going to be a thing we would be ever doing, because generationally speaking, like, the odds are not stacked in our favor to do so. You know what I mean? So
I do.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just it's things like that that, like, when you look at the, things like inflation, you look at this and that and the other thing, like, and then you extrapolate that for 50 to 100 years, and you're like, what chance does anyone have,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It gets
doing
kind of
anything
crazy.
if things continue the way that they go? Or maybe sometime someone will discover time travel between now and then, and we'll be able to fix all this stuff before it happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. uh yeah, that'd be awesome. Man, yeah. I don't know if I want to bring it up, but there was this, well, I guess I do because you just mentioned it, but there's this one guy that came back. I think it was in like the 70s or something, and said that he was part of like this time agency that was trying to stop energy wars from happening. And I just thought it
Yep.
was so interesting because the other day, and I forget the guy's name, but if you guys look it up, you'll be able to find it. And yeah, like he put out like this video and stuff that at the time, like late 80s, where people were like, oh man, like this is crazy. But he allegedly like met with government officials and stuff like that. And it was just so interesting where the stuff that's going on in Ukraine and stuff right now, where I was like, wow, it's like a couple of things that he said, that people thought were nuts, like actually came to happen, like
Yeah.
in terms of like early stuff. And he like released like an essay and stuff online. I'm really blank on the guy's name, but it was such an interesting story that I was like, oh, that would make a good book. But then, with like stuff in the Ukraine right now, I was like, man, I was like, that's kind of crazy, that like to
Yeah.
think that maybe a couple of things that he actually said like were actually true. So
My
yeah, it was like kind of weird, but
my favorite story that is a time travel, an actual story, is that Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking, before he died, threw a party for time travelers. And
oh,
it was
that's
his
cool.
way of proving that time travel either did or didn't exist. Is, I'm going to throw a party for exclusively for time travelers, and if nobody shows up, that's how we'll prove that the time travel is not real.
Oh, that's cool.
And so yeah, and it's and nobody showed up. Now, of course, the what if guy in me wants to write the story of Stephen Hawking's time travel party.
That would be awesome. I would definitely read that. That'd be awesome.
I want to write that story now. And I
Yeah.
literally had that thought while you were, and now I've
Oh, that'd
said
be
it.
cool.
So of course someone will probably beat me to the punch. But you know what? I would rather, whether it's having fun writing it or having fun reading it, I don't care.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to take that idea and run with it, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to.
Well, I do feel like though that too is like my wife was talking about today. She goes, "Well, you shouldn't mention that you're Roman and Romans and Zombies book." I said, "Well, I said if someone does it, that's fine." I said, "But the fact is that we're not going to write the same book, and we don't.
Yep.
I haven't said anything about my actual characters. And for me, again, it's about characterization and characters drive the story. And I'm like, I feel like I have." Some great characters developing, and whatever someone comes up with, I'm like, sure. And I'm like, that might even be a cool marketing idea. We both come up with the same idea, but we write two different books just to see, whose does better, so to speak. It's like,
And I mean, look, I mean, from almost anything, there's more than there's. I have a theory I've always used in marketing, and it's called Coke versus Pepsi.
oh,
Okay.
yep, yep,
And what I've always said is there's always room for at least three ideas,
yeah, yeah,
that will always be successful: Coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper.
yep.
you
No,
know,
it's true, yeah,
and so anything after that is fairly derivative, but there's
yeah,
always room for at least three main ideas to be successful.
yeah, yeah.
And so, and that it actually dovetails into something I put off writing for a couple of years. I have another book that I'm about a quarter of the way through, and it's called My Dear Watson, and it's set in in the world of the Sherlock Holmes. And the problem is that the focus was on a character by the name of Enola Watson, who was named after Enola Holmes's, Sherlock's sister.
Yeah, yeah.
So no sooner do I get about a quarter into writing this, I plotted out the whole thing. I've got a marketing plan. I've got everything ready to go, and I'm just going nuts on this thing. Then do I get fun old Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things decides, oh, I'm going to do an Enola Holmes movie. Well, screw me now. And I threw it down and I said, you know what, I'm done for now. I said, this is going to go somewhere because she's very talented and honestly,
a great movie.
loved the movie, thought
Yeah,
it was a great movie, and she's going to do a sequel. But then
I'm excited. Yeah.
age kind of mellowed me a bit, because it was a few years and a pandemic. So 50 years. And it mellowed me a bit. And I said, you know what? There is room for more than one Sherlock Holmes,
Oh, for
esque
sure.
story. And I think it all depends on characterization and
Yeah.
how you choose to do it. And it's not even Enola Holmes. It's Enola Watson. It's actually fictionally speaking, it's John Watson's daughter named after Sherlock's sister.
Which I think would be
And
awesome.
so well, I took the Batman Beyond approach. I'm taking the Batman Beyond approach of she is learning how to do it from an aged Sherlock who can no longer function.
That'd be awesome. That's
See?
really cool.
See? So that's the kind of the thing that I'm going with. And, there's a couple of main mysteries she's trying to solve. One is very personal to her. And then the other one is the more overarching mystery. And so, and that was planned as a several book series as well. So, whether or not everything happens the way it should, I hope it does. But, if it doesn't,
I think it'd be a cool young adult for sure. I mean, there's
that's
not
exactly
a
what
lot
I'm
of, there's
pitching.
not a lot
Like
of Nancy
strong
Drews
female
anymore.
lead.
Yeah.
I got a good female lead. There's some LGBT, crossover in there, but also, I just wanted to tell a good story with modern figures that people, especially young people, will connect to.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. But
that's
it's very similar in terms of like, no sooner do you start something and like you're afraid that someone else is going to have the same idea. And I allowed myself, I would have been done with it had I continued doing it. I might have even beaten her to market had I really even done like the old, like, well, it's this meets this. Instead, I put it off and thankfully no one's really done that story the same way that I would have done it. So I feel like I can still play in that sandbox a little bit, and hopefully that once Hidden Talent is done, that's the one that's next after that. And then I have one other Greek mythology one that I have planned after that, which is another it's another very LGBT driven story with Medusa.
Oh, that's
and it's
cool.
called Stonehearts.
Oh, that's awesome.
Never stops.
Yeah.
And that one I've already written about 3 chapters of. So
awesome.
I've started that one too, because I try to get at least the ideas started so that, if I have to stop and then come back to it, like I can read a little bit to get myself refamiliarize myself and then get back into that world. The hardest thing I have as a writer in terms of like writing stuff is I feel like I have to finish and I can't move on to the next thing until after I finish, because it's really hard for me once I'm in the heads and the mind space of the characters that I'm in the world I'm creating and that I'm in. It's hard for me to jump from one to the next. So those are my biggest problems as the thing. Like everyone's just like, you seem to have a lot of ideas. I'm like, the ideas are not the problem. I'm an insomniac and I just, I have a lot of time to think, I mean, there's just, it's, the ideas are not the problem. Even the time to write is not the problem. It's getting everything out and then if I have to come back, the transition, navigating the business is a problem right now. That'll mellow as I get more experience. But right now it's going from one thing to the next, especially because when you write, you finish a draft and then you might, hand it off to someone else for notes, but you want to start working on something else. And so I'll give it notes, and then for me to take those notes and then get back in the same headspace as I was when I wrote what I was writing is really difficult. I find it's a lot easier with short fiction, like flash fiction and stuff like that, because it's just a couple of pages and that doesn't seem to, throw me as much. But if I have to go back and reread 50,000 words, that becomes a lot more of a challenge. And for some reason, my brain does not like to transition.
I know that feeling. It's not as easy as shifting gears in a car. I wish it was, but
no, I wish it was. I learned how to drive stick.
A lot easier that way. I guess we could combine these two. I didn't realize before.
That's cool.
But in terms of like Kindle, so I was just curious how you decided on, going, to upload, your book here to Kindle Vella. And I was kind of curious if you had a different process for writing short stories versus writing for Kindle Vella.
Okay. All right. So the decision-making process was this. They put out Kindle Vella, I think, as a competitor to Wattpad, basically.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't familiar with Wattpad. I mean, I'm I wasn't familiar with Wattpad in the same way I'm not familiar with TikTok. I'm aware of their existence, but I just don't understand all the nuances. All I knew was that I was already doing some self-publishing through Amazon anyway. This seemed to be a way to monetize and get out, some stuff fairly quickly. I like the idea. I'm still using it as an experiment because let's be honest, there's nothing ever saying I can't unpublish this stuff and take it somewhere else.
Yeah.
In terms of short stories and how I decide kind of like what I'm going to do for short stories versus flash fiction or whatever, the idea for me is that short stories are, even if they're, Kindle Vella is made to be real, like very short stuff, like very easily digestible. Short stories, I mean, is a broad term because it could be 2,000 words, it could be 5,000 words, it could be 10,000 words. Kindle Vella, I'm trying to keep most of that stuff 2,000 to 3,000 words, absolutely max.
Okay.
And it's stuff that is just, I had a good idea, but it's not, broad enough for me to turn into a full-blown short story or full, enough. Basically, it's enough where if it's an idea that I could write the entirety of it in a writing sprint. Like I can sit down and I can write one complete idea from beginning to end. I can send it in for like 1 or 2 edits, and then when it comes back to me, that's it, it's done. I can publish it and it's ready to go. That's kind of was my thing with Vella. Also, it's just another arm that does earn money that I'm trying to see how it does. And when we talk about things like active or passive income, there's the stuff that we do actively to go out and do things like, there's the actual selling of our books, whether it's in person or online or whatever. But the passive income of, I need to get stuff out there that is just already out there and people can find, and there's a discoverability aspect to it and stuff like that. I can promote it. And it's short stuff too. So it's short enough that it'll give people a taste of my writing and what my writing style is and my voice and stuff. And it's not limited to any one genre. It's so people are going to get a pastiche, if you will, of different kinds of writing. So, The Sound of One Hand Clapping is basically a fanfic for Peter Pan. The other one is called Dead Pixel, and that one is kind of a cross between horror and sci-fi. And I have another one that's going to be coming out probably in a week or so. It's already written. I just have to get it edited. Called Susto, and that one is straight up horror. And so, but it might give me a chance to play around and do romance. It might give me which I've never written, but I might be good at it. But this gives me an excuse to try, and it'll give me whatever. And it's those things that will allow me to write when I'm not able to, for one reason or another, whether it's location or just lack of inspiration or whatever, to write the other stuff, the longer form stuff. Because sometimes as much as I have a hard time changing those gears, sometimes you do need a break. Like I haven't written on Hidden Talent in about 4 or 5 days. And I want to get itching for it. I want to get back in that world because I know exactly where I'm going. I know where the end of that book is, and I'm about 5 to 10 chapters out. And I just want it, I want to get to the end of that one because I'm excited for it. But I needed that. I had these other ideas, and I just knew, I can just get this stuff out, and hey, I can just post it, make some money, maybe, or at the very least, it gives me something to post to followers. It's content that I can put in my newsletters as new things that I've done. And then later on, it's stuff that if I have enough things done, I can maybe do a collection. And then do them as a collection or something like that. But it seems to be an experiment that Amazon's running. It is funded, like they have their own, kind of a pool of money set aside for payment for stuff like this. And I actually have already made money on it. So cool. I got a bonus for and I have for some other stuff that I had on there that I decided to pull because I was going to turn it into something else. But I made I'll tell you, I made like $27 on something that was up there for like a week.
Oh, that's crazy.
Right. And had only a handful of views. And so, but it gives me something to talk about too, because it's something not everyone is doing yet. It's something that's fairly new. You wanted to know about it, so I figured this is a good experiment to try out. I might try Wattpad, I might try Patreon, I might try whatever. The only thing is that a lot of what those require is they require an audience,
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
pre-existing
yeah, yeah.
audience. I don't have that, but what I do have is I have things that are free that I can post places, and then hopefully direct an audience too. And Vela happens to be one of those things where I can post it there. It doesn't cost me a cent and will actually pay me for people to read it.
Hmm.
So not at all an advertisement for Vela. Like I said, it's an experiment. I'm willing to see where it goes, and we'll see what happens with it in the future. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
it goes back to, what we were talking about for question two, with, trying to get multiple, levels of income. And I have a couple of short story ideas or novellas that I thought, oh, this summer I could probably bust out, 10,000 words for that in a day.
Mhm.
Same thing, like finish it up, send it to a quick editor, and then get it there. I'm more of a longer writer, but I do have some different ideas where I'm like, well, it would be cool just to get them out, just to get experience, get experience editing and things.
Yeah,
My friend does them as a palette cleanser. And he was
yeah.
talking about putting them on Vela. He's like, well, I do them in between getting done with drafts or something, to get my mind off it, but to still do
The
something.
palette cleanser is a perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. It's the amuse bouche of writing.
No, yeah, but he's like, I just put them on there because I have this one, which I always wanted to do a serial for, like a Firefly-esque crew who
Mhm.
mines out in space and ends up getting in a bunch of trouble and has a bunch of different adventures. Very Han Solo Firefly type thing with, like, 6 or 7 different crew members.
Yeah.
And I want it to be kind of like a progression serial. And instead of just throwing it on my website and or whatever and hoping that I can get people to pay for them, I was like, oh well, when I was looking at your website, I was like, well, it'd be cool to put them on Vela, and then each of them would be around 10,000 words, and then eventually I could do an anthology. But instead of just waiting, they could actually, I could just put them on Vela, make something, like you said, build an audience. So I think that
Yeah.
is actually something that I am going to be doing this summer. So I was really glad
Nice.
I was reading more about it on your website because I just heard about it recently on another podcast. So I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. So
One of the first pieces of what I consider to be modern fan fiction that I ever wrote was a Firefly piece
oh,
that I
that's
wrote
cool.
back in, oh God, it had to be the early, well, whenever Firefly was on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
After that, because I'm one of those few people that I didn't discover Firefly until Serenity.
Oh
So
yeah. I was
yeah,
right
I
about that
went and I
time.
watched Serenity, and I was like telling a friend of mine, I'm like, I watched this thing like 3 times in the theaters, and he's like, there's a TV series, right? And I'm like, what? So anyway, so then I did that, and then I kind of became active in that fandom a bit, and then that led to one of my first more modern pieces, and that was a fan fiction that is still available online at a
Oh,
place
that's
I have it
cool.
bookmarked, but I have not directed anyone to. But it's takes place on the anniversary of Wash and Zoe.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah, so but for your idea, if you ever want to do a collaboration, I've already, you said space mining thing with Firefly, and I'm like, in my head I was just like, I have ideas,
Oh yeah,
um
yeah. I would definitely be down to collaborate because I there are a couple things that, like, I'd like to do. I don't know if you're familiar with Galaxy's Edge. They
mhm.
had done it before Star Wars, so they're just great books. But yeah, like they collaborated, and I know sometimes it's a little scary to spend a lot of time and collaborate. I think Clayton Snyder and Michael R. Fletcher did a great job with Neuromuscular Groans. I'm about to read that really soon. And I've heard a lot of people really enjoyed that. Like that was, I feel like they were fairly efficient at it. It took 2.5 months, but I just thought, like, it would be cool to collaborate with a serial because anytime, you and I could meet, for instance, right? And I would encourage other people to think about this too, because I had a friend mention this. He's like, my buddy and I meet on a Zoom call on Sundays for an hour to plan. They
Yep.
outline their story. They'll meet another, then the next Sunday, and then that's when they each write, and then on the next Sunday. So it takes them about 4 Sundays, but they might have enough for 4 or 5 different serials, and then they put
Yep.
them up on Vela. And I'm like, that's a genius plan, I think, personally, because you're still learning. It's like having a partner writer, and if
Yeah.
I'm struggling one week, you can help me fill in. And then it's like you have 2 people to, keep track of the world building and stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah, I would definitely be down to do that, particularly this summer. I would love to set a schedule for that. So even if
Yeah.
you want to do something like, maybe even if you'd be interested, we could, do a serial. I was thinking about starting a serial or anthology for my like Men in Black kind of thing, like the company. And I thought it'd be cool to do, different stuff, different horror stories, supernatural stories, obviously some aliens, monsters, stuff like that. But yeah, I thought
Yeah.
it'd be cool to do that and put it on Vela. So that'd be awesome.
Goes right back to what I would say. Why not?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
the worst thing that could happen is you try it, you realize like, this story is not as developed as I thought, or even the collaboration relationship is not as defined as you hoped or whatever. And
Yeah.
then it's just like, well, we tried, and you can always go back and try something else.
Yeah, but it is
No
nice
harm,
because
no
then you each
foul,
have a
but you don't
product. Yeah.
try.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
it's nice because then you each have a product, and it's not as, and then we could even do, I like that because my friend said, I was like, oh, he goes, we're just gonna put ours into an anthology too after Kindle Novella. And I was like, well, that's freaking genius because then you both build up an audience, you both have this. And I said, you're building it over time, and you're not, and if it's like if schedule doesn't work out, it's like one of you could do a little bit more, it's like I was like, that makes a lot more sense, I think, than doing an entire book series like Galaxy's Edge. Like those guys have done a great job, writing together and stuff over years. But I just
Yeah.
think like, and they even talked about how they even did a few under a pen name, like the same pen name, and then they just split the profits and the costs. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. I said I think I more likely prefer like both names on it or whatever.
Yeah.
To build an audience. I'm not really into pen names as much because I want to build my own brand kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
I
like
mean,
even sharing a name on a cover is
people
more
will
than
go like, well, Stephen King does a pen name. I'm like, Stephen King writes
it's
so
Stephen King.
much, they
Yeah.
made him put out a pen name
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he has
yeah.
too much shit coming out in one year.
Yep.
Great
Totally.
problem to have.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm like definitely ready to get stuff onto Kindle Vella because I'm like, even if you're just putting out, like you said, 10 short stories, it's stuff that you could even pull later on and give us free stuff for if it's not making money for your newsletter, or something like that. But
I
I
mean,
just think
the idea too of, well, here's the thing with Vela too. Your first 3 stories are free. So free
that's
to
cool.
not just, free for your readers. So after that, they have to buy, they have a weird credit system. So after your first 3, they have to buy credits, and then they buy your future stories. So you have 3 stories to hook someone. And so that's why I also, using this as a sandbox for everything, not just one genre, is because it might entice someone to say, well, I'll buy that story, maybe not this story, maybe this one, to give people choice. And I think because that's what a lot of people do want. People want choices. And so, something like that. Vela, I think is a great experiment to try. And if you can build up enough of an audience using Vela, no one's saying you can't then pivot to a Patreon or something else because, but you have to give people something up front to know what they're getting. And, especially when it comes to, books and stuff like that and other media, we're hampered by the fact that we don't have that visual aspect that movie and TV people and all that kind of have. You might have more so than most because you also do illustration. It's the one creative endeavor I can't do. I can write all day. I can help with movies. I can do this. I can do that. Anything visual, I'm in. Except when you put pen to paper, you would think that like I had some kind of derangement. It never comes out. I'm like, I swear it's a bunny, and they're like, that is not a bunny. So it's one thing I fail at, and I'm actually so thankful for like websites like canva.com and stuff that help with like things like book covers and stuff, because if it wasn't for stuff like that, I would be lost. That and just graphic designers in general, I would be absolutely lost.
And that's why I like Vela, because I think you could just do the Adobe stock images and like just throw 2 things together.
It doesn't even do images. It doesn't even do images. It's just crazy. Words. And the one thing I love about Kindle Vela, the one thing I will say is they put in a space for author notes, which to me I use as director's commentary. And so at the end of the story, they have a space and it says notes from the author. And I use that as a catch-all, basically, for like, here's what I was thinking when I was writing this part, or here's what I was whatever, because it doesn't seem to be a huge word cap on it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you could write the story and then write the story of the story underneath it. But I think it's also a really good way to talk back to your audience when you're not sitting there with them, to kind of proactively field those questions of, well, what were you thinking when you wrote this,
Yeah.
or just even a place to put your contact information is, so where they can find more stuff.
Well, that's cool.
I mean, there's a lot of other stuff. I highly recommend just, look into Kindle, look at what it does and doesn't do, because it might not be right specifically for what you want to do. Maybe Wattpad or something else might be better, but the fact that there is there is money to be made there. The fact that it's Amazon, so there's obviously an easier way to get people there because they already have accounts with Amazon. They already have familiarity with their check in and out processes and all that kind of stuff. And that's also where most people are going to get ebooks and books anyway. So to put it there, logically speaking, makes sense, but it may not. It's like the reason why some people pick Indiegogo over Kickstarter, or Seed and Spark over either of those other two, or something like that. Like, you have to look at your specific project and what you want to do and see if that marketability of it fits that business model.
Yeah. I just think, like, for Vela, like, I was just listening to somebody's podcast, and they're like, like, in terms of, like, I mean, it's the same as I talked to Christopher G. Brenning, like, he said he sold more Audible books in like around 4.5, 5 months than he did, Kindle. And again, it's a whole different audience, Kindle or paperback.
Different audience.
Yeah. And then I think too, like, there's some people that just, love short stories. I mean, look at Reader's Digest, those kind of things. And I think that I just personally feel in my gut that if you are somebody that can pop up really good short stories very quickly, or do serials, and you have an interesting story, and you're an anthology person, like, I just think that, like you said, like, again, like, why, like, I was thinking this summer, like, end of every week, I'm going to come up with one short story around my, fixing my novels or whatever to put on the Kindle Vella. And even if it's whatever, it's like, again, it's experience, and it's like teachers pay teachers. Like, this summer, I had a lot of stuff that we made the last like 5-6 years, and I'm just going to create a new account and upload it. And if it doesn't make money, it's fine. But if it just sits up there, it will make money. If I just leave it on my computer, it's not going to make any money.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of, like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Exactly. And what if your short story is, like we talked earlier, right? What if you're just a great short story writer, or people really like your characters, or they really like your anthology? It's like, I just think that, and I think, there are some stories that are episodic, and that you could, turn into a really good serial, and I just think that, like, why not? Like you were saying, like, might as well shoot for it. You never know, right? You never know.
And there's so many ways to express your creativity online now, and attempt to make a living off of it, that to not even give yourself the opportunity to do that is a disservice to yourself, and your potential audience, because they're going to miss out on, some level of entertainment that they wouldn't have had a choice for before, So I completely agree.
I mean, we're always looking for new ways to grow our audience. And I just think that, like, I know right now of 4 short stories that I could finish up, even with my crazy schedule, by the end of the month, and send somebody to look at real quick. And even if it was like, you or something, and not necessarily an editor, but just somebody, to go through, or like a beta reader, it's like, I could do that and then just post it. And it's like, those 4 stories. And it's like, well, I just think it's like, I listened to somebody today, they said, well, it's free money on the table. They're like, let's just say, right, like, you were talking about, like, $27. Now let's say that you had 4 stories that made you $27 this month, right? Or 20. Well, that could already go towards half of, a couple of companies that make you cheap covers. That's already a cover from one of your other books. And it's, or like,
pays for business cards for me to take to festivals.
That too, yeah. My stickers for podcasts. Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or if you save it,
you have to look at it as an investment in your business and what your return on investment is going to be. And it kind of goes back to what I said before, like, what's your business plan? You gotta kind of treat it like a business if you're going to be in business. And it's tough. I mean, there's a lot to do, a lot to remember, and it's easy to just go, I just want to write, but if you are a traditionally published writer, your job does become a lot easier, but you're effectively paying someone else to assume the risk that and all of the cost up front. You are paying for it. It's just covered in your contract.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what
yeah.
I mean? Like,
And you're
like
still
rather than making
expected to.
100% of your
Yeah.
royalties, you're making 40 or 60.
No, yeah, and you're also
So
expected now. I just talked to a couple of traditional authors last week. You're still like also expected to still have your own platform and still promote. It's not like it was in, the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s,
no,
even 8 years ago, even 5 years ago. It's like, especially with the pandemic and the rise of indie publishing, like now, hybrid publishing is more on the rise. Look at Brandon Sanderson, right? I mean, that was all, you
yeah.
know, I mean, it is what it is. It's like you have
And
to do it
that's,
if you
yeah,
want to do it.
it's the best way to look at it is because I know that there's people on either side of that, and it is what it is, and more power to him. He made the money.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, he obviously proved that there is an audience for what he does.
yeah.
So
Like I just watched one podcast and a couple of people I looked to for marketing, and one of the guys said that his Kickstarter, after Brandon did that, he said per day, just nothing actually did, just when Brandon did that per day for literally like 9 days, for his backing went up 5.4%
it's more
per
people
day.
are on the site and are
Yep,
discovering additional
exactly.
projects
Yep,
that may be listed next to it.
yep,
Absolutely. I
totally.
mean, and that goes to show that and we never. I think a lot of people don't look at things like this because they look at the empty bowl and they look at the full bowl, and as soon as that bowl over here gets a little full, they go, "Well, that's because you're stealing from this." And it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
no, you don't understand. If you're the guy who owns both the bowls, you win.
yeah,
Or in any case, like if you're missing the point of like everyone's getting fed,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep,
like
totally.
don't look in your neighbor's bowl, so to speak. Like concentrate on your own bowl, and if you need, ask. If you whatever this, at the end of the day, like what's good for one is good for all. It's all
I
in
say
how
that
you
all the
really
time.
kind of approach it.
Yep.
And just because one person assumes some level of success, there's not a reason to get pissed off at that person. Like
Yeah,
that guy has worked for years to accumulate a following that he has. He
yeah. He
has
worked
got the
hard.
opportunity to write on high profile projects that have done well. There's no reason he shouldn't make that kind of money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like that's expected. It's kind of like in Hollywood where they go to make a movie, right? And what they do is they create a package, and that package of the movie is the screenwriter, the director, the actors, etc., the producers, etc. And all of those people that they bring in all have dollar signs attached to them. And I don't mean their fee. What I mean is this is the last movie that this guy was attached to made this much money, so he's worth at the box office this much money. And that is how they package movies. You want to know why every movie has freaking Channing Tatum and Chris Pratt in it? Is because they keep making money.
Yeah.
Like, so the minute they stop making money, well, now we'll get more Zoe Saldana stuff, so, or whatever, like, name an actor or actress that does well and another that doesn't do as well. But, that's how Hollywood makes movies. Hollywood makes
Yeah.
movies based upon that because it's a financial equation to not lose money. It's a profit loss statement. It's not creativity. We will continue to get Marvel shows and TV made and TV shows and movies because they're popular. And hey, I'm fine with that. I like them. I'm a big comic book guy. So more Batman movies, I'm winning. I don't care who plays Batman at this point. I'm winning. Same thing with Spider-Man. Same thing with all these other, like, fine, who get me 6 more Joker movies. I don't care, as long as I get more Batman and Joker movies,
Yeah.
But the financial equation of how those things get made is purely based upon the popularity of the people involved. And Sanderson has a track record of success. And so, yeah. And I mean, honestly, behind the scenes, he's like, oh, I wrote these 3-4 secret things. No, there was probably no secret about them. He probably pitched them to someone. They said, we'll give you this. He said, take it and shove it. And then said, I'll do it myself and I'll make more money. Because I don't see a world where that's actually not the conversation that happened.
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, I've been referencing him as the future of hybrid authors for a long time. I think it was so smart of him to say, I'm going to do Skyward and these things on my own, Evil Librarians or whatever. And and I think that was so smart of him. I've been listening to his online lectures since before the pandemic started at BYU, and it's like he talked about that right off the bat, and then the pandemic happened, and it's like he talked about it even more. And I thought at the time, right at the start of the pandemic, I was like, that's the most genius thing that I've ever heard anybody say, when people are like kind of criticizing, like, oh, well, he's leaving money on the table. I'm like, no, I'm like, he's just
Nope.
going to take, I'm like, and now
He
like,
made he
yeah,
made so much more money
yep,
doing this, even after Kickstarter takes their fees, even after he pays out whatever, I don't know what his perk levels are or anything
yep,
like that,
yep,
even after he pays for all of that,
yep,
even after I mean, let's be honest, to do an ebook is not going to cost him anything. So
yep,
anytime he has an ebook that's going to go up on Amazon or Nook or any of those other ones, that's basically free.
yep,
Okay. He'll have to pay a cover artist. He'll have to pay for traditional publishing fees, which, by the way, even if you get your stuff printed through Amazon, I will tell you right now, an author copy of Saving Hitler cost me $2.15. That's how much, if I want to buy a copy of my own book, it cost me $2.15 to buy off of Amazon. So let's assume he's paying that, probably less because of volume, right?
yeah.
So he's going to pay pennies on the dollar for that. Everything else goes into his pocket.
Yeah.
And, because, let's be honest, like we said before, he's not paying to travel to these festivals and stuff. He's invited, he's put up, he's
Yep.
carted around, and he's fed.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell he is losing on this deal.
Yep.
And the only thing that he is losing is, unfortunately, he's going to get a tax bill at the end of the year, and that part will suck. But hey, that sucks for all of us.
Yeah. Still more money though.
His will just suck a little more.
Yeah. Well, and I think too,
and even
like,
then, depending on his investments and his profit loss statement and all that kind of stuff, he may even be able to defer most of that money.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, that's.
I just think like,
and he's
that's
doing,
like,
and you know what he's doing? He's doing what every rich person in the world from the dawn of time has always said: if you're going to do something, do it with somebody else's money.
Yeah. Nope. Totally.
So, I mean, and look, this is me saying, I don't know anything about the guy. I don't know about anything about him personally. I know a few of the projects he's written for and stuff he's done. I'm not what I would call a fan, but in terms of like game, recognizing game, oh, hell yeah. Yeah. Like, I see you, man. I see what you're doing. And, and understanding how the entertainment industry works, I think kind of at a broader spectrum, even, from an author perspective. Yeah, I would have probably done the same thing in his
Oh,
world,
for sure. Yeah, for sure. I met him years ago. He was like right before I would say he became like what he is now.
Right.
He just seemed like he was a really nice guy. I've heard a lot of people, say the same thing. But yeah, I was like, it's like there are a couple authors that if they'd done the same thing, I'd kind of be like, okay. But with him, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, yeah, it's like, it just seemed like it was well worth it. But yeah, I'm definitely jealous. I think that's where most people's argument is that they're just jealous and they just can't actually say it, like
the only dangerous part that comes from it is the people who think that if they do the same thing, they're going to get the same results. And I saw that. You can't.
He talks about that all the time online, man. He talks about that, he can do this. Like he can put out a 300,000 word book if he really wants to, and people will read it and buy it. If you and I did that right now, no, like he talks about author credibility. It's like, and like you said, like, people are going to buy it, and people are going to go crazy for it. It's like, but he has, fulfilled a certain level. Like for me, Warbreaker, I know it's one of his least popular ones, which is crazy to think about because I'm like so jealous of that book. I love that book. I want a second and third one so freaking bad. And I loved Level of Law. My friend and I are about to read Mistborn, the first book, really soon, and probably both through the trilogy. It's like, I'm like, I don't know. I just think that, like, again, like he said, like, he has never let me down. I love the story. He's a workhorse, and I think that, if you and I did that, people would be like, yeah, whatever. And I think you have to be ready for that.
But we haven't fulfilled our end of the author-reader contract.
Yep, exactly.
I think there's a contract between your readership and you that it's unwritten and it's silent of, I promise to do this, and if you come along on the ride with me, eventually we'll get to this.
Yep.
And if he gets to that, then that he's earned the right. And I think that's the same reason why people will if we have to look at analogs of that in the film industry, I'd say that's why you get to he would be a J.J. Abrams, or he would be a Spielberg, or he would be a or whatever. And I mean there's a track record. The track record works, and even the stuff that he doesn't, that doesn't work for some people or is considered to be a flop, still has the word New York Times bestseller on it. And that, which, by the way, is the only goal I have for my writing career, is that someday I just want to have the word New York Times bestselling author Nicholas LaRue on one of my works. I don't care what it is. The great part is once you get it on one, you can put it on all of them. But that is my only goal as a writer. If I happen to make money, great. If I happen to garner an audience that enjoys what I do, that is even better and more important to me than making money. I like money, don't get me wrong, please pay me. I'm fortunate enough where like I can write more for enjoyment than need right now. And I know that sounds weird to say, but like I'm lucky. My wife has a good job. My job is I do woodworking. I own my own business. My job is to do that. I write, I fix the house, and I take care of the dog. That's, like we bought a fixer upper and all that. So, I mean, it's not a small amount of work. I'm minimizing the work to, whatever, but I'm lucky that if, I stopped working tomorrow, or if I got sick or something like that, we're not going to lose our house. My wife makes a good living. That said, my wife gets sick or whatever. Oh yeah, we're definitely losing the house. We're fucked. Pardon the French. So, so I'm lucky enough where I have the time and the ability to kind of sit back and think more about connecting with people and stuff like that. I don't have to work in survival mode, immediately. That said, like I'm hoping that eventually that time makes me a better writer, and and that the fact that the pressure's somewhat off, I can use that to really kind of dig deep and come up with good stuff. Because now I don't have an excuse.
No, I get that. For that last one there, what news, updates, or promos can you share with us currently?
All right, got a lot of stuff here. So I'm gonna rapid fire through it, I hope. All right, so the good news is I'm going to preface everything by saying you can find everything there is to know about me and what I'm doing over at niclarue.com. That's spelled NICLARUE.com. I spell my name like Nicolas Cage does. My parents did that to me. I don't know why. So it's just NIC. Anyway, so niclarue.com. You can also find me on most social media. It's just at that Nick LaRue, also spelled NIC. And then I do have a newsletter. You can sign up for it on the website, or contact me and I can get you signed up. That is comes out monthly, and that kind of gives more of the updates of what I'm doing, where I'm going to be, shows I might have been on or will be on, stuff like that, pictures of my dog, all that kind of fun stuff. And then I have a podcast myself coming out by the end of March. That's called the Scribbling Scrivener podcast. Cool. Yeah, thank you. And then that's going to be some very similar to this, like one-on-one interviews with filmmakers. God damn it, authors. It's what happens when you do a freaking live show for filmmakers for 10 years. You tend to say filmmaker for everything.
One's on TV, one's in your mind. It's the same thing.
Same thing. So So I'm going to do a podcast for authors, and kind of this one-to-one kind of conversation is very similar. And then let's see, I have Susto coming out on Kindle Vella probably within the next week. That's another horror kind of short piece of flash fiction. And that should be fun. I enjoyed writing that one. That was I did that during a writing sprint with a couple other authors.
Oh, cool.
And I was going to work on something else, and then the place where we met had no internet, so I had to kind of make something up on the spot because I couldn't access my book. So thankfully I had the old notepad in the phone that I take notes on. All right, so what else do I have going on? I have the Kindle, so all the stuff on Kindle Valley. I have 2 stories available right now. Susto going up soon. So one story is called The Sound of One Hand Clapping. That's the kind of the Peter Pan, kind of dark, version of Peter Pan that I have kind of on there. I also have another one called Dead Pixel. It's actually based on a short script that I wrote, and that's the psychological horror one. Another piece of flash fiction. Let's see, Saving Hitler. is available now on it's on Kindle, but it's also on Kindle Unlimited for free. So if you wanted to get it and you are an Amazon Prime member and you have Kindle Unlimited, you can get that for free right now. You can also get a paperback version of that is also available on Amazon. Obviously, if you do get it and you like it, please leave a review. Please also check me out. I am on Goodreads and all that kind of stuff, all the usual places to leave reviews and all that kind of stuff. That would be appreciated, even if you don't like it. And like I've said before, if you don't like it, eventually I will write something you do. So stick around and eventually we'll get to something you like. Yeah. I'll even take suggestions, because screw it, right? You might have a better idea that's more suited to what you like, and other people might like that too. And maybe you just don't want to write it. Well, I do. So look at me go. So other than that, I'm on a bunch of podcasts and shows this month and next month, but hopefully I'll be transitioning to some more in-person events. I'll be updating people on that. The best way to kind of keep up on that is the website and the newsletters. That's really about it. I could have sworn I had more, but maybe that's it. I think that
sounds like quite a bit.
People are tired of me now.
Well, yeah, so obviously our audience knows, you can find Nicholas through the description, YouTube, Spotify, RSS.com. So make sure you go, we always put the author's website first, so you can find Nicholas's website there. Social media links will be there per usual. You guys can also go to my website, Twitter, things like that, and go right to the website. Make sure you go to the Fantasy Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast tab right there, and you can find everything right there. Nicholas, again, really, really appreciate you coming on. It was great talking to you before we started recording and during. So, I look forward to chatting you up on social media, things like that. Obviously we can discuss some other things privately, which would be really fun, I think, to, collaborate on and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about that. Been looking for a partner for a while to try some stuff with. So definitely excited there. So audience, stay tuned. Get two crazy minds together. Probably get a pretty good story. So.
Nice.
But thank you
for
so
having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. Anytime I come talk about writing, horror, whatever, you hit me up and we'll figure out a time and date to do it, and we'll put it up on the YouTube channel and get it on Spotify. So
YouTube and Spotify, like and subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because it always helps with all the authors. So again, thank you so much, Nicholas. I hope you have a good rest of the day. And as soon as my tech guy and I double check this, I will give you the green light for posting this tomorrow, and I'll share the link with you, my friend.
Thank you. Have a great one, man.
You too. Have a good night.
Take care. You too.
Bye.